Hello, everybody. I'm Kim Scott. Welcome to the Radical Respect podcast.
And I'm Wesley Faulkner, her co-host, and today we have a special guest. We have Amy Gallo here on the show. Kim, could you tell us a little bit about Amy?
Amy is amazing. Amy and I met in 2017. Amy is a workplace expert who writes and speaks about gender, interpersonal dynamics, difficult conversations, feedback, and effective communication. All of these are topics near and dear to my heart. She is the best-selling author of Getting Along: How to Work with Anyone, Even Difficult People, and the HBR Guide to Dealing with Conflict, as well as hundreds of articles for Harvard Business Review. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It is really exciting to have you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Why don't we start? I'm going to ask you a question. What is, you don't have to name names, but describe the most difficult person you ever worked with and how you dealt with it. And I'll do the same. And
Okay.
I bet Wesley can also come up with something.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm sitting here thinking, well, can I name names? No, I'm not going to name names, but I have
Criticize in private, but we can share stories.
But I have a long list to choose from. But I will. So there was one person I worked with when I was a management consultant who, not to brag, but when I was a consultant, I was like a rising star. I had barely done anything in business before I started there. I was quickly promoted. I was well respected. I was doing really well. And someone who had been at the firm for a while and left came back. And it turns out she was also very well respected. And they put us on a project, and I was really excited about it. And then immediately I started hearing she was talking about me behind my back. She didn't think I was doing a good job. And every time I tried to address it, because I am someone who likes to address things directly, not always. And I have some of those stories too of when I wish I had, but I didn't. Yeah. Every time I addressed it, she would say, "What are you talking about? I never said any of that. Nothing's wrong." And I could tell from her body language that she just didn't like me or something was going on. And of course, I interpreted it as her not liking me. And it got to the point where I escalated it to our boss. He was like, "I'll go talk to her." He says, "She says nothing's wrong." I mean, it was just, I felt like I was shadow boxing. Like I couldn't, like there was some fight we were in, but I had no idea what it was about. I had no idea how to fix it. And it was one of those situations where I literally had to grit my teeth and make it through this project. Luckily, I was working as a consultant and I knew a new project would come along and things would change. It would have been a totally different story if I had been sort of permanently, a colleague of hers.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the Radical Respect podcast, but what you're talking about is classic radical candor concept, which I call manipulative insincerity.
That's
right. The person is neither challenging you nor caring about you.
Yeah.
And that is infuriating to deal with.
Yeah.
Often when people ask me how to deal with manipulative insincerity, the short advice I give, which is not really a fair way to put it, is you just have to burn your way out of the jungle.
That's yes. And tell me what you mean exactly by that.
So I think the first thing that I try to do is really solicit feedback in a way that shows them that they're gonna that I will reward, that that they're not going to get punished by telling me. I have to somehow try to prove to them. I have to try to get it out of them. But invariably what winds up, it's hard. Often they won't. You can be world class at soliciting feedback and they're not going to tell you what they're really thinking. But invariably what happens is someone else will come along and they'll tell me, "Oh, so-and-so said such and such about you." And this is the burn your way out of the jungle thing. Then you've got to say, all right, the three of us have got to sit down and talk. And this happened to me. It was not a work situation. It was a personal situation. And basically, I had been dating someone for a long time, and his best friend came and told me that he had been lying to me about something for several months. And he had found out from this man's lawyer.
Oh my gosh.
That's extensive.
Who he was also friends with. Yeah. So I was like, and had me spinning. And I was up at 3 a.m. spinning, and this was a long time ago remember when you could call AT&T and it would put a 4-way call out?
Yes.
The operator called this man I was dating, called his lawyer, called his best friend, and we were all on the phone. I was like, if I'm awake at 3 a.m, they're going to be awake at 3 a.m.
That is certainly burning your way out of the jungle, isn't it?
But it was the only way to get to the truth of what had happened.
Yeah.
So,
who was off? Was he lying? Was a friend
he was
lying?
lying.
Like, what was the result?
He was lying. He was he was busted. And I mean, honestly, I probably could have figured that out without having to wake everybody up in the morning. But you know how when you're in love with someone, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly.
And I was giving him like 18,000 benefits of the doubt. And by the end of that call, the benefits of the doubt were out.
Yeah. They had expired.
Yes, I had learned what I didn't really want to learn. So yes, that's kind of what I mean. But it's really awful when something like that happens. So you have my sympathy.
Yeah. And I think it's classic passive aggressive behavior too, of like, oh no, everything's fine. When you know from the body language, from the rumor mill, right? And I didn't have the skills to deal with it. And in retrospect, my boss should have put us up both in a room, right? Like that's what my boss, if he had done the right thing, I think he would have sat the 3 of us down and said, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so unfortunately that's not what happened. And she and I never resolved it. It's one of those, sometimes when I'm up in the middle of the night and I'm like, do I have any like hanging chads out there in the world?
Yeah, that's one of them.
That is one of them.
Maybe you should call her. As soon as we hang up off this podcast,
maybe we should bring her into the call. We can have the 4-way.
Let's burn our way out of the jungle right here, right now.
I was just curious, does it feel like what you're hearing about what was said about you? Was it critical feedback that you, in retrospect, saying like, knowing what you know now, like it was something that you could have actually done better? Or was it just more of a reputational sabotage that was happening?
I would love to go back in time, Wesley. That's such a smart question, because I think at the time I was like 100% reputational damage. She does not like that I've done well here. She does not like that I've earned the respect of these people who used to respect her more. But I bet you're right that there was some feedback in that was probably true. And I can't even, it's funny, I can't even, you know how you sort of get a little amnesia about these things? Like I can feel it. I remember the feelings. I can even picture the conversation with my boss, but I don't remember what she was exactly saying about me. Like I think it was about making the wrong call with a client. Like that I was not treating the client the way we should have been treating the client, either pushing too hard or not pushing enough. Like that's vaguely what I remember it was about.
So it sounds like you were doing things differently, but not necessarily badly.
Exactly. And I think, but I wish I could go back and remember what it was, because I am a big believer in all feedback, not all. Most feedback has a kernel of truth, and even feedback that feels completely off base, sometimes even biased. Sometimes there's a tiny little nugget in there that can be helpful to you. And I know, Kim, I've heard you talk about similar things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important when you get feedback to be able to reject it.
Yes, of course.
Before you reject it, you kind of want to do a process of separating the wheat from the chaff, right?
Yes.
And maybe there's no wheat there, but even if there's just one kernel, you can still throw the chaff away and keep that kernel of wheat. I've never separated wheat from chaff. I don't really know what I'm talking about.
Is that hard to do? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think even asking the question, what if this was true? So like, if I know in my heart of hearts it's not true, what if it was true? What would I do differently? Because that might unlock something that you might want to do differently. And so, again, and It's funny. I can't even remember her name right now. That's the amnesia. Like, again, I can picture her face.
Awesome.
Yes.
I know what letter it starts with. I'm not going to say, but I'm like, I can't remember her actual name. Anyway, it's funny how that works.
Yes. Yes, it is.
What's sad thing is about the gaslighting that you're mentioning, like when you brought it up, she denies it. That means that even if you can get to the point where you could have a conversation, you have no idea if you're actually having a real conversation, if they're willing to deny things that are true.
Right.
And they'll talk around things and maybe they'll give you something, but is that the main theme that they want to come across, or are they trying to end the conversation quickly, or are they trying not to hurt your feelings, or they're actually trying to hurt your feelings in a specific way that's not actually true? When someone is willing to gaslight, it's almost like it's the trust has to be rebuilt, even to the point where you can have a conversation, or bringing in that third party, like you're saying, just like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Are you hearing what I'm seeing? Like, can we use this as a way to level set what is the reality that we're going to choose to be in right now?
Yeah.
It's so hard. So it sounds like if you went back to advise your younger self, the main advice you would give her is to ask your boss to get in the room with both of you so you can.
Yeah.
Anything else you would do now that you're wiser and an expert in dealing with this?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you were saying earlier, Kim, about making it as easy as possible for her to give me the feedback she wanted to give. I might have done some hypothesis testing. This is a term I took from Heidi Grant, a social psychologist, where I, sort of said, I get the sense you're not happy with how I'm talking to this client. I would totally understand how you could see it that way. Do you think that's true? Like, just do it, like trying to put a little bit more grease in the conversation to like, I'm open to this. I can hear it.
Yeah.
And that's the advice I give in my book, Getting Along, about dealing with passive aggressive people. Like, you have to make yourself disagreeable with, or no one is, because a lot of passive aggressive behavior comes out of fear of conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree, Wesley, with your portrayal of what she was doing as gaslighting, not necessarily passive aggressive behavior. But I think if I had made myself just so open, I think I'd seemed impervious to feedback because I was the star. And I think if I had made clear, I know I'm not perfect, I know I'm not making the right decisions all the time, you actually have a different perspective that's really valuable here. Can I hear that? Like, if I had actually validated the fact that she had a perspective on me and my behavior that could be useful, it would have taken a lot. That would have taken a lot of work. I could do it now. I definitely couldn't have done it then. But that's the advice I would have given, is just like pave the way for her to be more direct. It may not work, but at least you've tried.
Yeah. I think also, I mean, I grew up in Memphis and Tennessee, which there are wonderful things about the culture there. And there are some not so wonderful things about I mean, I'm not talking more broadly. I'm talking about specifically the tendency to try to be nice and polite.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not talking more politically and racially.
Sure.
Which we should also talk about if we're going to talk about my hometown.
Oh, yeah.
But there is in the culture there this tendency to not say the thing, not to be disagreeable, to always agree, to always be polite. And there's some of that is the desire to be kind to people, which is something to hang on to. But there's also some, all too often, there's like the anecdote about how nice, and that is not really what somebody means.
Yeah.
Or bless your heart.
That's what I was about to say.
They really mean.
My neighbor's from Louisiana, and she often when we're talking about a different neighbor, she'll say bless her heart, and I'm like, you're saying I hate her guts, but you say bless her heart. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. No, that's the manipulative insincerity, but that's the not actually caring, but pretending to care, and it can be very confusing, But one of the other things that I have found in dealing with passive aggressive behavior is to try to focus on that other person's desire to be kind. That, like, if I'm going to assume good intent, then what I will say is, what's really important to me beyond the success of this project is my relationship with you.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you can do for me that will help us have a better relationship is tell me when you think I'm wrong. Like disagreement is my love language.
Right.
And,
Right.
which it really is.
Yeah.
Now it was not, it took me a while to get there.
Sure.
And sometimes that can open someone up who's if it's not actually manipulative insincerity, but fear of conflict. That's causing the passive aggressive kind of behavior.
Yeah. And you know what was holding me back from doing that then, which is something I write a lot about in the book and certainly advise people now, which is that I didn't want to let her win. Like I felt like even telling her I cared about our relationship would somehow give her power, right?
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, oh, forget that. Like it costs nothing to be genuinely sincere, to tell people your love language is conflict, disagreement, or whatever it is. It doesn't cost you anything. And the short-term loss, if you want to call it that, is such a gain for you in the long run if you can get that relationship back on track, if you learn something about yourself, if you actually get the feedback she really wants to give you, right? Like it's just so short-sighted to be like, I don't want to lose,
Yeah.
Can I ask an alternate reality thing as well? Like if you went back in time and when you first were partnered with this person and started the conversation or the relationship, if you will, with, oh my gosh, I'm glad that you're back. I've heard so much really amazing things from you. I'm glad that we get to partner. I hope to learn so much from your experience. And I'm glad that this will give me a chance to up my skill set to kind of live up to some of the things that I've heard about you. Like really lay it on thick at the beginning to show that I feel that I can learn.
Yes, if I had meant it,
Let's say whatever.
I'm
just saying, what do you think that relationship would have been different, and maybe she wouldn't have done that behind your back, and instead of said like, oh, this person wants some of my criticism and feedback and stuff.
1000%. Like I can't even, and not only that, like I think that would have been a really smart way to set up the relationship as an interchange, right? As opposed to a competition, which is sort of what I think our boss even sort of set it up as like, you two are so great. Best of luck, but the other thing, there was actually in that same job, it might have even been the same project. I think it was another project. A good friend of mine, I will give him a name because this is incredibly helpful feedback. Am I allowed to curse, by the way?
Yes.
On your podcast? Okay, great. Okay, so Rosario was someone who I worked really well with. And Rosario once in a late night meeting, we were like pulling some late night for a client deck or something, said to me, we were chatting about what we should do. And he said, do you realize that a lot of times when you speak, there's a silent "you asshole" at the end of your sentence? And I was like, what? and I realized, he's like, yeah. And he was telling me, you're condescending.
Yeah.
And it was this, I'm sure I had a silent "you asshole" at the end of every sentence with this woman. So not only did I not do that lovely soliloquy that you just did, Wesley, but I probably put her on the defensive from the first time I spoke and just treated her like I didn't think she had anything to give me. And, I will chalk it up to being young and arrogant, and I'm now a recovering know-it-all. But like, I think that I not only didn't do the proactive thing, but I really probably damaged the relationship before we even started.
Can I also maybe offer a hypothesis about what was going on?
Please.
This could be totally wrong. But often I have found when a man has two direct reports who are very talented women, he will, without even realizing what he's doing, try to create a cat fight. And that's what he's saying. Those are not my words. That's the word that another man I knew was using when he was describing to me. And I was like, this is so unacceptable. The way you are managing these two people is so full of misogyny. I can't even tell you. And yet this happens, I think, with some frequency. Do you think that could have been, I mean, I don't want to throw your boss under the bus,
Yeah.
but
Yes, is the short answer. I think that could have been going on. I don't if it was going on, I don't think it was conscious,
yeah,
actually. Doesn't make
it's
it
an
any.
unconscious. I mean,
Yes.
I found that there was a woman who I worked at Google with. We weren't in the same department, but we were sort of, well, she was more senior than I was, but we worked very closely together. And people kept trying to pit us against one another.
It's
And I
yeah.
was like, I have respect. Like, why are you saying this? And then there was another time when I had a boss who had appointed my new boss. So
Mm,
and he was definitely trying to stir up a cat fight between me and my new boss, and he was like,
mm.
"You're gonna hate this, but your new boss," like literally, that was
Oh
how.
gosh. Never start a sentence, "You're gonna hate this,
Yeah,
but." Like, that's
especially
just
you're gonna hate who I'm telling you your boss is.
oh, it's
And I
terrible.
remember looking at him and I said, "What are you talking about? She is awesome. I love her. I have such respect for her." And then he started getting mad at me and I was like, "What the hell is your problem?"
Yeah. Well, and if you look at I mean, there's a couple things there. One, I think there's the conscious desire of some people to create that competition, either because they think it will give them
They
power
they think it's funny.
or
I mean,
right, or amusing or who knows. But there's also like the what we know from the research on gender and competition is that if you and I get into a disagreement, Kim, society is going to see that as quote unquote a cat fight, right?
yes.
If Wesley and a male colleague of his get in a thing, they'll think it's a rambunctious debate. Right.
Yes.
So like it's the way we portray the competition. So the competition between me and this colleague might have been fine if we had
Yeah.
handled it a little better, but
Yeah.
the view on it was
Yeah.
also so harsh.
And
And
then the setup of the
yes,
way, like the two in a box kind of thing, is like
exactly.
not setting things up for peace.
No, not at all. Not at all. All
I
right,
was just
Wesley,
you
going to say that sometimes it's people, sometimes it's systems, and the
yeah.
people in the systems are working for whatever is in their favor. And if it is a competition, because there's like a pie that can only be sliced so many times, and you have to get your slice. I really hate this thing where people say you got to play the game. I don't know the game exactly, but it's what people think is the game, and so they try to play the game. Where they try to take other people out, or they try to win at all costs by putting either other people down or showing how much they're so much better.
yeah.
That's something I really hate as well. But it's systems, and
Yeah.
sometimes the people can be mean, but
Mhm.
sometimes the system rewards that, and that's some of the things that keep that going
Yeah.
and doesn't cause it to be resolved.
Yeah. Well, and I think professional services in particular does a terrible job of that, of like there's this sort of because you're all sort of doing the similar thing, so there's this unfair competition of
Yeah.
often there's forced ranking, forced stacking. Like it's just it's not you're right to point out the system was really problematic.
Yeah.
Okay, but I want to hear your stories.
Okay, Wesley, you wanna go or you want me to go?
Yeah, I'll go first because you
Okay.
probably have some in the shoot, and I don't want to lose mine in my head because I'll forget. One of the most difficult people that I had to deal with. I'm trying not to be so specific, but I've been doing developer relations for a while,
Mhm.
and my role at this company was reporting to the VP of marketing, and the VP of marketing had in a previous role before getting this job at this company had one never managed people before
Yikes.
Wow.
and they became the VP of marketing,
Wow.
and two, this is one of that might be shocking, has never worked in marketing before.
Oh
Oh my
no.
god.
Was it someone's brother? Like what? Like what?
I don't know how this made sense, but the
Oh, I'm so
the
sorry.
and
Yeah.
so when I got hired for the role, I was told like, hey, you know developer relations, we're hiring other people, can you help get them set up? And so I came in with guns blazing. I was told that I'd be fast tracked to director, and so I set up the whole developer relations department, set up KPIs for me, the team. I negotiated contracts with our vendors. I redid our social strategy. I put swim lanes for each of the the developer advocates to say, like, you do this type of content and this is the volume you should expect. And I worked with our agency to make sure we can revamp some of our external interfaces and stuff like that, and like made a whole plan and a pipeline and steps and all this stuff. And basically I did everything, not just my job, but the whole department. And I kind of ran that. And his approach was not that, oh, wow, Wesley's awesome, thank you for doing this, and so I don't have to worry about it. His approach was, he was very egocentric and he felt like he had to contribute. And so the example that I use is, it's like if you have a conversation with a buddy and let's say you wrote a book. And you're like, I wrote this book and I want a lot of people to buy it. And then they chime in, so what you need to do is get on Oprah. Get on Oprah. She'll tout your book, and then boom, solved.
No
and they
problem.
think they're the most amazing person in the world, and then you have to say it doesn't work like that. And
I'll call it
was
right
almost
up.
like,
Yeah.
That's like every conversation with him.
Oh
like,
God.
Oh, we just got to get people talking. We got to go viral, and I was like, oh my God. And it was the hardest conversation. I was like, let's say we did go viral.
Yeah.
What are we going to send them to? Broken site? Products that don't work?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to think this through.
Yeah.
And so, and this was my boss. And so it's almost like every time that he would show up for a meeting, it would be like, he would be late by like 5-10 minutes. So all of us would be on the call waiting. And then he would show up and he's like, so what's going on? No agenda. And then these ideas where he'll just listen to himself talk for most of it. And it's just like,
it's like he searched, what should a VP of marketing say?
Right.
And then
watched a movie that was really bad.
Or like studied The Office and was like, what would Michael Scott say? And like, I mean, it's the blustering that's so frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah.
And got to the point where I was doing this, and like 6 months in, I was like, okay, I was told I'd get fast track to director. Let's get that done. Delayed. And finally he said that I had to prove myself for the role in order to get that promotion. And I said, I think I have. And if I'm not going to get it, I'm not going to do that work anymore. I'll just do my job.
Yeah.
And then after that, he said I was underperforming. And then I was like, all this stuff. That was, I would say that was the worst coworker that I've had who was my manager.
So how long between when he got this amazing role without having a marketing background or managing people experience and when you left the team?
So the person predated me. So he hired me.
Okay.
So he was in the position before.
Right.
But I was the first hire for developer relations. So he was working, even though he had a VP title, as an IC. So there was not really anyone reporting to him.
I see.
Really.
So you were his first
direct report.
Oh man.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than training your boss.
No.
Especially if your boss doesn't want to be trained and they know everything already.
Yeah.
Well, you're dealing, I mean, if I think about the archetypes for my book, it's like the know-it-all, the political operator, and the insecure boss.
All three. You got all three at once.
Like hot mess is what I would call that. And then, I mean, it is one of those things I feel like if Kim and I had been there, little people on your shoulder, we would have been like, get out. Like
I did.
Right. Because I'm not sure, like there's sometimes the combination is so destructive and it's like, there's not even really a hook, right? There's no it didn't seem like there was good intention. It didn't seem like there was knowledge. It didn't seem like there was much you could get from this person. There's false promises. I mean, it's just sort of this cascade of bad stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things that somebody has been challenging me on, because somebody will describe a situation and I'm like, don't forget to quit. They're like, all right, let's imagine I cannot quit. Now what do I do? So let's imagine for whatever reason, Wesley was well and truly stuck in that job.
Yeah.
What if we could go back and give young Wesley advice for enduring this unendurable situation? What would we tell him?
Yeah. Well, I think first I would think I would ask you, like, is there anything that you find of value, even if it's small, even if it's like, is it just that this person is good at handling our relationship with this other department, like something that was good? Because I think I would start there because there's a long list of things that
are bad.
are bad. But like, is there anything small you can find to respect or appreciate or get something from?
I think he was personable on a non-business relationship type of way of talking and conversing.
Yeah.
As long as we didn't talk about business, he was a fine person.
Right.
Yeah. Which maybe was how he got. I mean, the world is so screwed up that would get him a job, but often it does. And you can learn like this person had no marketing experience, no management experience.
Mm-hmm.
What was the magic in their personality that allowed them to get this? And can I learn something from that?
Yeah.
I don't think it was his personality. I think it was his connections. He was in the cohort of people that I think knew the CEO that was able to bypass a lot of different things. I'll just say this. The environment was not very good.
Mm-hmm.
And his pedigree to get the job was similar to other people in different roles.
Yeah.
In terms of experience and even if people like, I don't want to be like an experienced snob and saying like everyone has to have the exact experience, but in terms of execution, most of them had execution issues.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, though, Kim, I think you're on to something, because I think especially with someone who's a political operator, I think sometimes our distaste, and I'm not saying this is your situation, Wesley, but like sometimes our distaste for how the political operator operates can prevent us from seeing what they're doing that has actually allowed them to get where they are. So was there something, and it doesn't sound like that this is the case, but was there something you could learn from how personable he was, or how he was building the relationships, or like, was there?
I could say after I left, he got fired, and then he went to another job and was there shortly, and then got fired again. So I mean, there was just this was an anomaly.
Yes,
in his especially bad. All right, so our advice to get out was probably right. There's one other thing. If we could go back in time, there's one other thing I might say you could try this. He knows a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Can you get him to introduce you to some of those people in a way that is that flatters him? Like, oh, everybody. Like, I would love to. Is there one person he knows? Like, make him feel like a hero for taking you out to coffee with someone. Like, that's. And maybe this is my manipulatively insincere coming out. But if you read Bob Sutton's book, The Asshole Survival Guide, there is a lot of advice in there. Like, if you are well and truly, like, there's a reason why manipulative insincerity exists, because sometimes it's if you're in a situation where you feel powerless, that's where some room for maneuver might be found. Actually, I hate to say that, but
well, and I think there's one other thing I would say, which is that because I think sometimes our distaste for a person in general, right? We think, well, the problem is them, right? But you could list out, what is the problem? What are you not getting that you need? Is it guidance? Is it introductions to other departments? Is it feedback? What is it? And are there other people in the organization? Which it sounds like maybe in this organization there wasn't.
We're not. Yeah.
But are there other people either in the organization or in your network that you can get that from? So at least while you're having to sit out this job, again, we're assuming you can't quit. Like, if you have to stick it out, could you at least be getting some of what you're not getting from this boss from other places?
Yeah, I think that's good. That's good advice. All right, you want to hear my story?
Yes, very much.
Before we bump, anything else that you want to ask us, Wesley, about young Wesley wants to ask us about that situation?
No, I think that's really great advice. I had to, in order to feel fulfilled in that job, really just focus on the things that I liked doing in my own personal accomplishments.
Yeah.
And and I really leaned on, like, when I was dealing with adversity, that means that I'm pushing against something, that a skill that I need to develop.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Wise.
this is giving an opportunity to try everything else. And just one other thing, the thing that I also told myself that I got from a previous job is that, let's say you're going to another job, and in the interview they say, tell me a time that you were in a difficult situation, and it's just like the exact describing the
Yes.
situation I'm in. What answer would I like to give that person
Yes.
who's interviewing
that's
me,
good.
and then use that
Love
advice
that.
now?
Yep.
And
So
so
good.
that's what I try
Yeah.
to do, to kind of like figure out, like, what are the ways that I want to at least recall this, that I'm doing the best thing that I can right now.
Well, and that's like, you're building the interpersonal resilience, because this is not going to be the last bad boss. This is not going to be the
Yeah.
last annoying colleague. This is not going to be the last hyper competitive peer. So
Yeah.
you're like, I love that. Future Wesley, what does future Wesley want to be able to say
In an
about,
interview. Yeah.
yes, about how I handled this situation,
That
which
is really good.
yeah. And you also talking about leaning into the parts of the job you liked. I mean, that's a concept called job crafting, right? Like, that's such a good, when you're stuck with a relationship you can't get out of for whatever reason, crafting your day, your career, your week, whatever, around that person, so you're still finding joy and fulfillment
Yes.
in the job, is so important.
Yeah.
I was there's this book I read. It's called Trauma Stewardship, and talking about how when people are in an industry that is surrounded by trauma, usually related to their trauma. For instance, if they're working on helping women get out of domestic violence, usually they have a history of domestic violence, and that allows them and draws them into that industry. So how do you not get burned out in that? And so in Trauma Stewardship, they're talking about one of the stories of a man who was in Auschwitz. And the interview was like, how did you deal with not having like freedom of choice? And he's like, oh, I had choice. I could choose to, when I left the cell, to step with my left foot or step with my right foot,
Yeah.
or look up or look down. Is just really just focusing on the sphere of like influence and what freedom they did have in order to figure out how they wanted to use that, was drawing away from the things that they didn't have the freedom to do.
It's incredibly powerful. Yeah.
It's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, my favorite book of all time, actually.
Amazing. Yeah.
And that's he's also, I don't know if you've read that book, but he survived Auschwitz, and he said he always had a choice. No matter how terrible the things that are happening, you have a choice in how you respond.
Yeah.
You may not have the degrees of freedom that you want, but you have a choice. Yeah.
Yes.
So powerful. All right, I'll tell my story quickly, and then because I know we're bumping up on time. But actually, at the end of Radical Respect, I describe this story, and I write a letter to my younger self. But the short version is, I had a job, and I learned that I was being paid, I don't know, 25% of what the men at my level were being. So not 25% less, but a lot less. And I went to my boss, and he said, you have to talk to the CEO, not thinking that I would talk to the CEO. But I did go talk to the CEO. And the CEO started yelling at me and saying, and I was in finance at the time, and saying, if I paid you this much, I'd be paying you more than my daughter, who was a kindergarten teacher. And look, kindergarten teachers should be paid as much as financial analysts, full stop. But the solution to underpaying teachers is not to underpay women in finance and continue to pay men more, obviously. And yet he was so angry and yelling at me. Like, I felt a little gaslit. I felt like maybe I had done something wrong. It was super early in my career. A whole series of other terrible things happened. I got sexually assaulted, not once but twice. Like a whole series of bad things. And he had unilateral decision. He was the entrepreneur, the CEO, the owner. Like, there was nobody to go to. And although he did not know, and I think if he had known, he would have actually taken sexual assault seriously. But understandably, I didn't feel like it was any use going to him.
Yeah.
And I was so angry. I was getting depressed, all the things. And I part of what helped me crawl out from that rage about my first job was well, first of all, I got out. I applied to business school and I was leaving. But I decided this man had gone to the same business school that I did. And I decided that he had done very well. And I decided, I've gotten all this crap from him, but I bet he can give me some good advice. And he gave me hands down. He did. Like I was like, I want your advice. And he was more than happy to give it to me.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes, even when you're so, rightfully angry at someone, you can still get something good out of that relationship.
Yeah.
But if I had to do it over, I would have done a million things. I don't know. What would you have done? Like, this guy starts yelling at you because you're asking for a perfectly reasonable raise.
Yeah. I mean, that is, well, again, that is a, like, I would put him in the tormentor category.
Yes, he was definitely
right.
tormentor.
Which is one of the hardest archetypes to deal with because they just have so much power over you. And I think you were in a situation for a variety of reasons. Like he wasn't even your direct boss, right? Like there was just, you had so little power in a broken system.
Yeah. Well, and I was working in what was then the Soviet Union. So I was far, far away from home, and there were not a lot of other jobs.
And I think and then I think, okay, you get into self-protect mode there, right?
Yeah.
Like you do that. I'm not sure any action you could have taken would have stopped him from yelling, would have changed his mind about the rate. Like, I think putting it on you in that situation is really unfair.
Yeah.
So I think then you get into self-protect mode, which is, how do I prevent this situation, that is unfair, right? And I think that's one of the first things, is accepting this is unfair. Because I think we try to negotiate with ourselves to decide, oh no, like, I guess I could see it from his perspective, or maybe I shouldn't be paid more than a kindergarten teacher, right? Like, we start to negotiate with ourselves to try to make it make sense.
Yeah.
When we just have to say, no, this is deeply unfair.
Yes.
And accepting that, absorbing it, talking about it with the people we can talk about it with. And then, how do I protect myself from that unfairness while still getting what I need, whether it's to stay employed, whether it's the advice about business school, whatever it is. And I think the job crafting we referred to earlier can help, right? What aspects of this do I actually enjoy, and do I derive fulfillment and satisfaction from? Can I spend my time there?
Yeah.
I think the other thing I like to do, especially with someone who has a ton of power and I can't do much about the negative interaction, is to say, okay, similar to Wesley's response about the future interview, I like to say, okay, someday I'll be a CEO.
Yes.
And what do I not want to do? How do I study this person to learn exactly what I don't want to do? Because then it becomes useful to you, while also being able to be a keen observer of their behavior.
Yeah.
You start to, and in some cases, I think that could also open up some other understanding of maybe why they're behaving, which isn't always comforting, right?
No.
Sometimes, but it helps to give you a broader view, rather than I'm a victim and they're the perpetrator.
Yes.
Which is just a powerless situation to be in.
Yes. Yes. I think that's exactly right. Excellent advice. Thank you, Amy Gallo. I wish that I had you there on my shoulder when I was 22 and struggling.
I feel like we need to do like a weekly podcast where we bring people. Like, I feel like the three of us could solve any problem right now. Like,
is that an offer?
Yeah.
That's why I wrote Radical Candor. That's why Wesley is doing this podcast with me. And I imagine that has something to do with why you wrote your book as well.
Yes. Yeah. The problem I am trying to solve with my book is sleepless nights, right? Is that I don't want anyone to be up at 3 a.m. going, oh my gosh, how do I deal with this? I want them to have the recognition that what we're doing is normal. Like, these unpleasant, unfair interactions are normal. They happen all the time. They're not right. They're not just, but they're normal. And so you should be able to know that you're having a human experience.
Yes.
And you have tools there are tools you can use to either protect yourself, make it better, maybe even establish a connection with someone who you thought maybe you never could previously.
And for those who missed it, what is the name of the book? And also, where can people find you and get in touch with you if they want to see more of your work?
Yeah, it's called Getting Along, How to Work with Anyone, Even Difficult People. The best place to find me is at my website, which is amyegallo.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there, get links to my articles. I do also co-host a podcast called Women at Work with Harvard Business Review. So if you're a podcast lover, which I'm assuming you are if you're listening, definitely subscribe to that as well.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. And we will see you next week.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Take care.